My name is Daniel Reyes. For 11 years, I have owned a 40-acre ranch on the edge of Comfort, Texas. I bought the land with savings from long-haul trucking and built the house myself, board by board, until it finally became home. When I moved in full-time, I thought the hardest part was behind me. I had no idea the real challenge would come from a homeowners association I never agreed to join, one that would test my patience in ways I never expected. The land had been part of a larger parcel decades earlier, before a developer carved out the surrounding lots and formed Comfort Ridge Estates. My property, by some quirk of old paperwork, was never officially absorbed into the association. Yet the HOA board insisted otherwise. Every year I received letters demanding dues for services I never used, including a pool I never visited and a security patrol I had declined. I ignored most of it, assuming the confusion would sort itself out. The board president, a woman named Carol Whitfield, took it upon herself to make my life difficult. She had moved into the development 3 years earlier and quickly became its most visible authority figure, walking the streets with a clipboard, photographing parked trucks, and leaving notes about lawn height. People in the neighborhood quietly called her Karen behind her back, not out of cruelty, but because the nickname fit so well it became impossible to avoid. The conflict reached its peak over something almost absurd. My own water well. My ranch has its own private well, drilled long before Comfort Ridge Estates existed, supplying water to my house and a small barn where I keep 2 horses. Carol insisted my well was somehow tied into the community's shared irrigation system and was inflating everyone's water bills, demanding I let an HOA inspector onto my property to audit my well. I declined, politely but firmly. I explained that my well was private, my land was not part of the association, and I would happily provide records to the county if a genuine dispute arose. Carol did not accept that answer. A week later, she showed up at my gate with a folder of bylaws, insisting I was violating community water sharing agreements that did not apply to me. Tired of the back and forth, I decided to make a point. I shut off the valve connecting an old, unused pipe near the property line, a remnant from the original developer's planning that had never actually been active in my lifetime. It supplied nothing to my own home, but it was, in Carol's mind, proof I controlled community resources. So I wanted to demonstrate the line had nothing to do with her irrigation, and that turning it off changed nothing. Carol did not see it that way. She called for help, certain I was sabotaging the neighborhood's water supply out of spite. Officers arrived within the hour, polite, but clearly puzzled. I welcomed them in, walked them to the well, and handed over copies of my deed, my water rights certificate, and a letter from the county clerk confirming my property had never been annexed into Comfort Ridge Estates. It took less than 20 minutes for the responding officers to realize there was no wrongdoing at all, only a long-standing misunderstanding. They were professional, and even a little amused, noting this was not the first call about boundary confusion in older developments like mine. One suggested, kindly, that the situation might benefit from a sit-down with the county surveyor to settle the property lines once and for all. I took that advice seriously. The following week, I hired a licensed surveyor to walk the entire boundary of my ranch and produce an updated, official map. It confirmed everything I already knew. My 40 acres stood entirely outside the legal boundaries of Comfort Ridge Estates. I sent copies of the survey to the HOA board, the county records office, and, for good measure, every neighbor who had ever questioned where my land began and theirs ended. What happened next surprised me. Instead of further conflict, the survey became a turning point for the whole community. Several other property owners near the edge of the development discovered they had similar discrepancies in their own deeds. Boundaries that had never been properly reconciled since the original developer's hasty paperwork decades earlier. A few of them reached out to me directly, grateful that my situation had finally pushed the issue into the light after years of quiet confusion. The HOA board, to its credit, took the survey seriously once it was paired with official county records. At the next general meeting, they voted to formally update their property maps and notify every affected homeowner of the correction. Carol, who had been so certain of her position, found herself outvoted by her own board when the evidence became impossible to argue with. I heard from a neighbor that she was embarrassed though she never said so to my face. A few months later, something I did not expect happened. Carol showed up at my gate again, but this time without her clipboard. She had baked a loaf of banana bread, of all things, and asked if she could speak with me for a few minutes. I invited her in, more curious than wary. She apologized, somewhat awkwardly, for the trouble she had caused, admitting that she had genuinely believed she was protecting the neighborhood's interests, even if she had gone about it the wrong way. We talked for almost an hour that afternoon, longer than either of us expected. I learned Carol had moved to Comfort Ridge Estates after a difficult divorce, looking for a fresh start and a sense of control in a life that had felt chaotic. Running the HOA had become her way of feeling useful, building a community she could be proud of, even if her methods sometimes rubbed people the wrong way. Hearing her story made it easier to understand, if not excuse, the friction between us. In the months that followed, our relationship slowly shifted from adversaries to neighbors who simply disagreed on a few things. Carol began directing her energy toward genuinely useful projects, organizing a community garden, coordinating a fall festival, and improving the HOA newsletter so residents understood the rules instead of guessing at them. She even asked my advice once about drainage near the development's southern edge, since my years on the ranch had taught me a thing or two about managing water on uneven land. For my part, the entire experience reminded me why I had bought this land in the first place. I did not want a property tangled up in disputes and committee votes. I wanted a place where I could build something lasting with my own hands, where the boundaries were clear and the work was honest. The survey I commissioned to defend myself ended up becoming a gift to the whole neighborhood, clarifying lines that had been blurred for far too long. I also started keeping better records after that, not out of fear, but out of pride. I framed a copy of the survey and hung it in my workshop, next to a photo of the day I finished building the barn. It serves as a reminder that even the most frustrating conflicts can lead somewhere good, if you are willing to stay calm, gather the facts, and let the truth do the heavy lifting instead of anger. The ranch itself flourished in the years that followed. With the boundary dispute finally settled, I felt free to invest in the kind of long-term improvements I had been putting off. A new fence line along the southern pasture, an expanded garden where my daughters now grow tomatoes and squash every summer, and a small covered arena for working with the horses on rainy days. Every board I nailed into place felt a little more permanent, knowing the land beneath it was unquestionably mine, recognized by the county, the survey, and finally, by my neighbors as well. I also began hosting an informal open house once a year, inviting anyone from Comfort Ridge Estates to see what a working ranch actually looked like up close. Families brought their children to meet the horses and wander the property that had once been the subject of so much tension. Carol always came, usually early, often with something freshly baked, and over time, she became one of the event's most enthusiastic supporters, helping spread the word to newcomers who had no idea the land existed beyond their fence line. Looking back on the whole episode now, years later, I find myself grateful in ways I never expected. The misunderstanding that once felt like a serious threat to my peace of mind turned into the catalyst for clearer boundaries, stronger community ties, and an unlikely friendship I still value today. It taught me that patience and documentation can resolve almost any dispute, and that the people we clash with hardest are sometimes simply trying, in their own imperfect way, to protect something they care about too. These days, when new families move into Comfort Ridge Estates, Carol is usually the first to greet them, often with banana bread and a clear, updated map of where their property begins and ends. She jokes now, with self-aware humor, that she learned the hard way to check paperwork before knocking on someone's gate. I still chuckle, thinking how an old, unused pipe nearly turned into a community-wide standoff. Looking back, I do not regret turning off that old valve. It forced a conversation that should have happened years earlier, one that ultimately strengthened the whole neighborhood instead of dividing it further. My ranch is still mine, fully and clearly, with paperwork to prove it down to the inch. And somewhere along the way, I gained something I never expected from the whole ordeal, a genuine friendship with the woman everyone used to call Karen, built not on conflict, but on the simple, steady work of getting the facts straight and choosing understanding over assumption.